In 1873, a drifter named John Chisholm owned more cattle than some European kings owned subjects. He started with nothing but a rope and a borrowed horse. Most people think cowboys just herded cows and collected a paycheck. That is dead wrong. The real ones ran side hustles that would make a modern entrepreneur jealous. Number 14 on this list was technically illegal in 3 territories, but it made men richer than bank managers. And number 6 created an economy so powerful that entire towns were built around it overnight. These 20 hustles built fortunes from dust, grit, and frontier nerve. Some were genius, some were brutal. All of them worked. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because what you are about to learn is the playbook the Old West ran on. Let us count them down. Number 20. Mustang breaking. Before barbed wire carved the plains into parcels, wild Mustangs roamed in herds so thick they darkened the horizon. A skilled bronc-buster could ride into open country, rope a dozen head, and spend 2 weeks breaking them to saddle. A green broke horse sold for $8 to $15 at any army post or ranch in the 1870s. And a man who could gentle 4 or 5 in a single week earned more than most store clerks saw in a month. The work was punishing. Broken ribs were routine. Cracked collarbones were expected. A hoof to the jaw could end a career in 1 afternoon. But the overhead was close to zero. All you needed was a rope, a saddle blanket, and nerve that bordered on insanity. Some busters traveled a circuit, moving from ranch to ranch, charging $2 per head just to take the fight out of a horse. Others caught their own stock from the wild herds, broke them in makeshift corrals built from cottonwood poles, and sold them at railhead towns where demand never slowed. The U.S. Army alone purchased 150,000 horses between 1866 and 1886. And a good share of those animals passed through the hands of freelance Mustangers who answered to nobody and kept every cent. Number 19. Buffalo bone collecting. After the great slaughter of the 1870s and early 1880s left the plains littered with millions of buffalo carcasses, a strange new economy rose from the bones. Homesteaders and drifters gathered bleached skeletons from the prairie, stacked them into enormous ricks beside the railroad tracks, and sold them to eastern fertilizer companies and sugar refineries that used bone char to whiten sugar. By 1884, a ton of buffalo bones fetched $6 to $8 at the railhead, and a single wagon could haul roughly a ton per load. Families that could not coax a crop from the dry soil survived entire seasons on bone money alone. In Kansas, bone ricks stretched along the tracks for hundreds of yards, white and gleaming like some graveyard monument to the herds that once shook the earth. Children as young as 10 dragged skulls across the flats, stacking them for their fathers while the wind howled dust against their faces. The bone trade peaked around 1886, when an estimated 2 million tons had been shipped east. By then, the prairie was picked clean, and the men who had made their living from the dead herds drifted to other work. But for a decade, buffalo bones were currency, turning slaughter into survival for thousands of frontier families who had nothing else to sell. Wolfer. Cattle ranchers paid bounties on wolves and coyotes that preyed on their herds, and wolfers turned predator control into a full-time living. A skilled wolfer would kill a buffalo or a steer, lace the carcass with strychnine, and return the next morning to collect the poisoned wolves that lay in a ring around the bait. Pelts brought $2 to $3 each at trading posts, and county bounties added another $1 or $2 per scalp. A productive wolfer could clear $50 in a single week during the winter months when fur was prime. The work was solitary, often dangerous, and deeply unpleasant. Strychnine killed indiscriminately. Eagles, dogs, and sometimes even a careless partner fell to the same bait. Wolfers lived in dugouts and brush shelters on the open plains, skinning their kills by firelight and stretching hides on willow frames. By the 1890s, the wolf population had been hammered so low that the trade collapsed. But for 2 decades, wolfing was one of the most reliable ways a man with no capital and no land could put hard money in his pocket on the frontier. Number 17. Freighting. Before railroads stitched the territories together, every nail, every sack of flour, every bolt of calico reached a frontier town by wagon. Freighters hauled goods across hundreds of miles of open country, charging by the pound per mile. A man who owned a team of oxen or mules and a sturdy wagon could gross $500 to $1,000 on a single run, from a railhead to a mining camp. The work was grueling. Axles broke on rocky trails. Rivers swelled without warning. Blizzards buried wagons to their wheel hubs. But the margins were enormous because demand always outstripped supply. Mining towns paid double or triple the going rate for goods during winter, when roads turned to mud and ice. Some freighters ran regular routes, becoming so dependable that merchants extended them credit and made them preferred customers. Others speculated, buying goods cheap at the railhead and selling them at frontier markup, combining transport and retail into a single hustle that compounded profit at both ends. Number 16. Hide tanning. Every ranch, every hunting camp, and every settlement on the plains produced raw hides that needed curing before they were worth anything. A man who understood the chemistry of bark tanning or brain tanning could set up a simple operation with a few wooden vats, some oak bark, and a scraping knife, turning stiff green hides into supple leather. Tanned hides sold for 3 to 5 times the price of raw ones, and the process required more patience than capital. Cowboys who wintered at remote line camps often tanned hides as a side job, selling finished leather to saddle makers, harness shops, and boot makers in the spring. Brain tanning, the method borrowed from Native Americans, used the animal's own brain matter to soften the hide, producing buckskin so supple it could be sewn into gloves. A single well-tanned deer hide fetched $1.50 in any frontier town, and a man who could process 20 hides over a winter had himself a respectable stake by the time the grass turned green. Number 15. Horse trading. Every settlement west of the Missouri needed horses, and the men who moved them from where they were cheap to where they were dear made fortunes doing it. A Mustang caught wild in Texas might sell for $5 at San Antonio, but fetch $40 in a Montana mining camp where horses were scarce, and winters killed the weak ones. Traders assembled strings of 20 to 50 head, drove them north along established trails, and sold at auction or by private deal. The profit margins were staggering, often 500% or more on a single drive, but the risks were real. Stolen horses could get a trader hanged without trial. Lame stock meant losses that ate into the margin fast. Comanche and Kiowa raiders targeted horse herds moving through the southern plains, and a man who lost his string lost everything. Still, the horse trade built some of the biggest early fortunes in the West. Men like Charles Goodnight started as horse traders before graduating to cattle empires, proving that the skills learned moving livestock on the hoof translated directly into larger ambitions. First pattern break. Here is where things get money. The cowboys who really understood money did not just work for wages. They stacked hustles the way a card sharp stacks a deck. A man might spend spring and summer on a cattle drive, earning $30 a month, then spend autumn breaking Mustangs at $2 a head, and winter tanning hides in a line shack. Each season had its own economy, and the smartest hands moved between them like water following a downhill grade. That layered approach is what separated the men who died broke in a boarding house from the ones who ended up owning the boarding house. The next entries on this list show just how creative that stacking could get. Number 14. Maverick hunting. On the open range before fencing, unbranded calves wandered free. and any man with a rope and a branding iron could claim them as his own. These orphaned or overlooked calves were called mavericks, named after Samuel Maverick, a Texas rancher who famously refused to brand his stock. In the 1870s and the 1880s, maverick hunting was technically legal in many territories, though the big outfits considered it barely a step above rustling. A cowboy who roped and branded 50 mavericks in a season could build the start of his own herd without spending a dime on livestock. Some men accumulated hundreds of head this way, parlaying found cattle into legitimate ranching operations. The practice was so widespread that Texas eventually passed laws restricting it, and cattle associations hired stock detectives to crack down on aggressive maverick hunters. But by then, dozens of future ranch owners had already built their herds from nothing. It was the frontier equivalent of a startup with zero capital, high risk, and potentially enormous reward. Number 13. Wood hawking. Frontier forts, steamboats, and railroad construction camps consumed wood at a staggering rate, and woodhawks supplied it. A man with an axe and a wagon could fell cottonwood, oak, or mesquite along river bottoms and sell it by the cord to steamboat captains who burned through 20 cords a day on the Missouri River alone. A cord of seasoned hardwood brought $4 to $8 at a steamboat landing in the 1870s, and a strong man could cut and stack a cord in a single day. Some woodhawks established permanent camps along popular steamboat routes, building up stockpiles through the summer and selling through the fall and winter when demand peaked. The work was backbreaking, repetitive, and lonely, but it required no special skill beyond endurance and a sharp blade. For immigrants, freedmen, and displaced veterans with no other prospects, woodhawking offered honest money and the dignity of self-employment on a frontier that rewarded sweat above all else. Number 12. Rodeo competition. What started as informal contests between cowboys arguing over who could rope fastest or ride roughest evolved into a paying circuit by the 1880s. Early rodeos offered prize purses funded by entrance fees and local businessmen who knew that competition drew crowds, and crowds spent money. A top bronc rider or roper could win $25 to $100 at a single event. Serious money when a month's wages on a ranch ran $30. Cowboys traveled between competitions, following a loose circuit from Texas to Montana, honing their skills against the best riders on the plains. The rivalries were fierce, the injuries constant, and the lifestyle was one long gamble. But for the men who excelled, rodeo offered something wages never could: fame and the chance at real wealth. By the 1890s, Wild West shows run by promoters like Buffalo Bill Cody were paying top performers monthly salaries that dwarfed anything a working ranch could offer. The cowboy who could ride and rope became an entertainer, and entertainment paid better than beef ever did. Number 11. Trapping and fur trading. Long after the mountain man era faded, small-scale trapping remained a reliable side hustle for cowboys working remote ranges. Beaver, muskrat, fox, and coyote pelts all had market value, and a man running a trap line along creek bottoms while tending cattle in the winter months could double his income without doubling his hours. The equipment was simple: a dozen steel traps, some bait, and knowledge of animal behavior passed down from older hands or learned through painful trial and error. A single prime beaver pelt brought $2 to $4 in the 1870s, and a coyote hide fetched $1 or more depending on condition. Line riders stationed at remote camps, weeks from the nearest town, often ran trap lines as a matter of course, selling accumulated pelts when they rode in for supplies. The fur buyer who visited ranch headquarters in spring was as welcome as the preacher and considerably more profitable to deal with. Trapping kept cowboys solvent during the lean months when ranch work slowed to a crawl and wages sometimes went unpaid. This is the second pattern break. Now here is where the real money starts showing up. Everything below this point on the list made men wealthy, not just comfortable. The difference between the hustles above and the ones coming next is scale. The men who cracked these figured out how to multiply their effort, turning one man's labor into an operation that generated income whether they were in the saddle or not. That is the jump from worker to owner, and it happened more often on the frontier than most history books admit. Number 10. Stage station keeping. Stagecoach lines needed relay stations every 10 to 15 miles across the West, and the men who ran those stations operated small businesses that generated income from multiple streams. The stage company paid a monthly fee for maintaining fresh horses. Passengers bought meals for 50 cents to $1 a plate. Travelers purchased grain for their own horses, and many station keepers ran a small store selling tobacco, ammunition, and whiskey on the side. A well-positioned station on a busy route could gross $100 a month or more, serious money in a territory where most men earned $30. The work was constant. Horses needed tending around the clock. Meals had to be ready at unpredictable hours. And the isolation attracted outlaws who saw stations as easy targets. But for a man willing to plant himself in one spot and serve every traveler who passed through, a stage station was a franchise before franchises existed, complete with a built-in customer base that arrived on schedule. Number 9. Beef jerky and pemmican production. Preserving meat was not just a survival skill on the frontier, it was a business. Cowboys and hunters who understood the process of cutting beef or buffalo into thin strips, salting or smoking it, and drying it in the sun or over low fires could produce jerky that lasted for months without refrigeration. Army posts, mining camps, and overland travelers paid premium prices for portable protein that would not spoil. A pound of quality jerky sold for 50 cents to $1 when fresh beef went for 8 to 10 cents a pound, a markup of roughly 800%. Pemmican, the concentrated mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes dried berries, fetched even higher prices from explorers and survey parties heading into remote country. The production required no special equipment beyond a sharp knife, a drying rack, and patience. Some operators scaled up, employing helpers and producing hundreds of pounds per season, selling to military quartermasters and trading post operators who bought in bulk. Number 8. Cattle brand inspection. As the open-range era created endless disputes over ownership, experienced cattlemen found work as brand inspectors at railheads, stockyards, and trail crossings. Cattle associations hired men who could read brands the way a banker reads ledgers, identifying ownership marks, detecting alterations, and spotting stolen stock. The pay was steady, usually $75 to $100 a month, well above a cowhand's wages. But the real income came from the reward system. Inspectors who identified stolen cattle and helped recover them often collected a percentage of the animal's value, and a single bust involving 50 head could yield a bonus worth several months' pay. The job required an encyclopedic knowledge of brands, a sharp eye, and the diplomatic skill to confront armed men about the origin of their cattle without getting shot. Brand inspectors occupied a strange middle ground between lawman and livestock expert, and the good ones were valued so highly that they could negotiate their own terms with the associations that employed them. Number 7. Line riding and fence building. When barbed wire arrived on the plains in the late 1870s, it created an entirely new category of work. Ranchers needed miles of fence strung across open country, and the men who specialized in building it charged by the mile. A fencing crew could earn $10 to $15 per mile of completed fence, and a 3-man team working efficiently could string a mile in 2 days. The math was attractive. Line riders who patrolled existing fence earned premium wages of $40 to $50 a month because the work was solitary, dangerous, and demanded absolute reliability. A broken fence meant scattered cattle, and scattered cattle meant lost money. The men who built and maintained fences understood that they were not just stretching wire, they were building the infrastructure of a new economy, and they priced their labor accordingly. Some fence builders accumulated enough capital to buy their own land, stringing their own wire around homestead claims and becoming the ranchers they once worked for. Number 6. Mining claim staking. Cowboys who drifted through mineral country kept their eyes on the ground, and the sharp ones recognized pay dirt when they saw it. A man did not need to be a miner to stake a claim. He just needed to find color in a creek bed, drive 4 stakes, file paperwork at the nearest land office, and either work the claim himself or sell it to someone who would. Claims in promising districts sold for anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s, depending on the quality of the find. Some cowboys staked claims with no intention of mining, treating them as speculative investments that could be flipped when a rush brought eager buyers flooding in. The Comstock Lode, Tombstone, and Deadwood all attracted working cowboys who traded saddles for pickaxes when the price was right. A few struck it rich, most did not. But the barrier to entry was almost non-existent, just the filing fee and a willingness to gamble, making claims staking the most democratic wealth-building tool on the frontier. Number 5. Saloon and gambling hall operation. A cowboy who saved his wages and understood human nature could open a saloon in a trail town or mining camp with remarkably little capital. A tent, a plank bar, a few barrels of whiskey, and a deck of cards were enough to start. The margins on liquor were extraordinary. A barrel of whiskey that cost $12 in Kansas City sold by the glass for 10 times that amount in a remote camp. Add a faro table or a poker game with a house rake, and the profits compounded fast. Dodge City, Abilene, Atlanta, and countless smaller towns were studded with saloons, opened by former cowboys who realized that selling whiskey to thirsty drovers paid better than being one. The risks were obvious. Drunken arguments turned deadly. Cheating accusations ended in gunfire. And the law, such as it was, took a dim view of establishments that generated too much trouble. But for every saloon that failed, another thrived, and the men who ran them became pillars of their communities, sitting on town councils and investing their profits in real estate and legitimate businesses. Number 4. Scouting and guiding. The U.S. Army, railroad survey teams, and wealthy hunting parties all paid premium wages for men who knew the country. An experienced frontiersman who could read terrain, find water, avoid hostile territory, and keep a party moving safely through unmapped wilderness earned between $75 and $150 a month as a scout, double or triple what a working cowboy made. Some scouts, like Kit Carson and Jim Bridger, became famous, but hundreds of lesser-known men made comfortable livings guiding parties through the Rockies, across the deserts of the Southwest, and along the trails that connected civilization to the frontier. The work demanded a rare combination of skills: tracking, navigation, diplomacy with native tribes, marksmanship, and the ability to make life-or-death decisions under pressure. Men who possessed that combination were in constant demand, and the smart ones leveraged their reputation into long-term contracts that provided financial security no ranch job could match. Third pattern break. What you are about to hear next separates the cowboys who made money from the cowboys who built empires. These final 3 entries are not just side hustles. They are business models that created generational wealth on the frontier. The men who figured these out understood something that most of their peers never grasped. The real money was not in working cattle. It was in controlling the systems around cattle. Number 3, land and water rights speculation. On the arid plains, whoever controlled the water controlled everything. Cowboys who understood this filed homestead claims not on the best grassland, but on the creek banks, springs, and river crossings that every surrounding rancher needed. By locking up water access, a single 160-acre homestead could effectively control thousands of acres of open range, because cattle that could not drink could not graze. Some men filed claims under their own names and then had family members, hired hands, and even fictitious persons file adjoining claims. assembling water monopolies that gave them leverage over entire valleys. The practice was ethically questionable and sometimes outright fraudulent, but it built ranching dynasties. Men who arrived with nothing but a saddle and a keen eye for geography ended up controlling water rights worth tens of thousands of dollars. When the big cattle companies came looking to consolidate, those water rights were the most valuable assets on the frontier, and the men who held them named their price. Number 2. Trail boss contracting. A cowboy who proved himself on enough drives could graduate from hired hand to independent trail boss, contracting with ranchers to deliver herds to market for a per-head fee. A trail boss who contracted to move 2,000 head from Texas to Kansas at $1 per head grossed $2,000 on a single drive that took 2 to 3 months. After paying his crew, buying supplies, and covering losses from stampedes and river crossings, a competent boss could clear $800 to $1,000 in profit. The best trail bosses ran multiple drives per season, hiring experienced hands and managing logistics with military precision. They became the general contractors of the cattle industry, bearing the risk but keeping the reward. Some, like Charles Goodnight, Oliver Loving, and Shanghai Pierce, leveraged their trail boss earnings into massive land and cattle holdings. The trail boss hustle was the clearest path from working cowboy to cattle baron, and the men who walked it changed the economic geography of the American West. Number 1. Cattle ranching on the open range. The greatest side hustle in cowboy history was the one that turned the whole frontier into a free pasture. Before fencing and federal land management, a man could run cattle on millions of acres of public grassland without paying a cent in rent. The only costs were the cattle themselves, the wages of a few hands, and the supplies to keep an outfit running. A rancher who started with 100 head of longhorns, bought at $4 each in Texas, could watch that herd double naturally every 3 years through calving. By the time those cattle reached a northern railhead, they sold for $25 to $40 a head. The math was simple and staggering. A $400 investment could become a $40,000 herd in a decade, all fattened on grass that belonged to nobody and everybody. This was the hustle that drew Eastern investors, Scottish bankers, and European aristocrats to the plains, all chasing the same irresistible arithmetic. Some lost everything in the brutal winter of 1886 to 1887, when blizzards killed millions of head across the northern range. But the men who survived, who had diversified their income with the other hustles on this list, emerged from that catastrophe as the founding fathers of the modern American cattle industry. They built dynasties that still operate today. Their brands still burned into the hides of cattle grazing land their great-grandfathers claimed with nothing but nerve and a willingness to bet everything on grass and sky. These 20 hustles were the real economy of the American West, not the gunfights and saloon brawls that Hollywood sells, but the grinding, clever, sometimes ruthless ways that ordinary men turned empty frontier into personal fortune. Share which one you would have tried in the comments. And if you made it this far, you already know the subscribe button is right there.